Episode 1. The Rain and the Red Hat. The world was very big, and Max was very small. Max was a dog who looked like a fluffy white cloud. He had so much hair that he looked like a giant marshmallow with 4 legs. On a cold, gray afternoon, Max sat alone at a busy bus stop. His owners had left him there a long time ago. He watched every car go by, hoping one would stop for him. But none did out soon. The sky turned dark, and cold rain began to fall. Max's thick, white fur became heavy and wet. He shivered because he was very cold and very scared. He didn't have a warm bed or a bowl of food anymore. He felt like the loneliest dog in the whole city. He put his head down on his paws and sighed. Suddenly, the wind blew a piece of bright clothing across the sidewalk. It landed right in front of Max's nose. It was a red wool hat. It was bright, warm, and very soft. Max sniffed it. It didn't smell like his old home, but it felt friendly. Max used his nose to open the hat and then pushed his head inside. The hat fit perfectly. It covered his ears and kept the rain off his face. Max walked over to a shop window and looked at his reflection. He saw a fluffy white dog wearing a very stylish red hat. He didn't look like a sad, abandoned dog anymore. He looked like an explorer. Max realized that he couldn't wait for his old life to come back. He had to be brave and start a new one. He shook the water off his tail, stood up straight, and took his first step into the big city. He was alone, but he had his red hat, and that was a good start. Episode 2. The Cardboard Castle. The sun came out the next morning, but Max was very hungry. He had spent the night hiding under a park bench, dreaming of dog treats. In his old life, food always appeared in a shiny silver bowl. Now there was no bowl. Max had to learn how to find food and a safe place to live all by himself. He walked down a quiet street behind some big shops. He saw a squirrel running with a nut and a bird catching a small bug. If they can find food, I can too, Max thought. He followed a delicious smell to the back of a bakery. A worker was putting out a bag of day-old bread. Max waited quietly. He didn't bark or jump. He just sat there, looking cute in his red hat. The worker saw him and smiled. "Well, aren't you a handsome little gentleman?" the man said. He reached into a box and gave Max a plain, crunchy biscuit. Max ate it slowly, feeling very thankful. He learned his first lesson. Being polite and patient is the best way to make friends. After his breakfast, Max found a very large, empty cardboard box near a furniture store. It was dry and clean inside. Max dragged an old, soft towel he found into the box. He placed his red hat in the corner and curled up. To most people, it was just a piece of trash on the sidewalk. But to Max, it was his first home that he found for himself. He called it his cardboard castle. He realized that being independent meant working hard to find what you need. As the sun set, Max felt proud. He was a little dog in a big world, but he was learning how to take care of himself. Episode 3. The Silver Fountain. Max woke up early in his cardboard castle. The sun was shining on his white fur, and he felt very thirsty. In his old life, there was always a ceramic bowl filled with cold water. Now, he had to find it himself. He put on his red hat and walked toward a place with many tall green trees. It was the city park. Max saw an old dog sitting under a large oak tree. The dog was big and brown, with a kind face and gray hair around his nose. His name was Barnaby. Barnaby looked at Max's red hat and wagged his tail slowly. "That is a very nice hat, little cloud," Barnaby said in a deep, friendly voice. Max felt happy to hear a kind word. He told Barnaby he was looking for a drink. Barnaby stood up and led Max to a tall silver post near the playground. "This is the magic fountain," Barnaby explained. "We must wait for a human to push the button." Max sat down and waited patiently. Soon, a young girl ran to the fountain. She pushed the button and cool water splashed into a small stone bowl at the bottom. Max drank until he was full. The water tasted better than any water he had ever had before. "Thank you, Barnaby," Max said. Barnaby smiled. "The city is like a big puzzle, Max. You just need to learn where the pieces go. Never be afraid to ask a friend for directions." Max realized that being independent did not mean he had to do everything alone. It meant knowing when to ask for help. Max felt a little bit smarter and a lot stronger as he walked back to his street, his red hat bobbing up and down. Episode 4. The wind and the sticket was a very windy Tuesday. Max was walking near his school when a big whoosh of wind came dancing down the street. The wind was so strong that it lifted the red hat right off Max's head. Max jumped as high as he could, but he was too slow. The hat flew through the air like a red bird and landed high up in a tall, thorny hedge. Max ran to the hedge. He could see the bright red wool, but the branches were covered in sharp thorns. If he jumped into the bush, his fluffy white hair would get tangled and he would get hurt. Max sat on the sidewalk and looked up. He felt like crying. Without his hat, he felt like a lost dog again. But then he remembered what Barnaby told him. The city is a puzzle. Max looked around the ground. He saw a long, thin wooden branch that had fallen from a tree. He picked it up in his mouth. He stood on his back legs and pushed the branch into the thorns. He moved the branch carefully, using it like a tool. Finally, the end of the stick caught the edge of the hat. Max pulled very slowly and gently. Pop. The hat fell out of the thorns and landed safely on the soft grass. Max was so happy. He shook the dust off the red wool and put it back on his head. He learned that even when a problem looks scary, he can solve it if he stays calm and thinks. He was not just a dog with a hat anymore. He was a dog who knew how to use his brain. Episode 5. The Artist in the Square one sunny afternoon. Max followed a trail of colorful chalk dust to the center of the city. He arrived at a busy square where many people were walking. In the middle of the square sat a young woman named Maya. She was an artist. She had many beautiful paintings of the sky and the sea, but no one was stopping to look at them. Everyone was in a big hurry. Maya looked a little bit sad. She sighed and held her paintbrush. Max watched her from behind a fountain. He felt a little bit sad for her, too. He knew what it felt like to be ignored. Max looked at his red hat and had a clever idea. He didn't want Maya to be lonely, and he wanted people to see her beautiful art. Max walked out into the middle of the square. He sat right next to Maya's favorite painting, a picture of a bright yellow sun. He sat very still and tilted his head. His white fur looked very bright against the red hat. Soon, a little boy stopped. "Look, Mommy, a dog in a hat," the boy shouted. The mother stopped to look at Max, and then she saw Maya's paintings. "Oh, these are lovely," she said. More people began to stop. They laughed at Max, and then they stayed to look at the art. Maya's face lit up with a giant smile. She started talking to the people and showing them her work. By the end of the day, Maya had sold 3 paintings. She reached into her bag and gave Max a piece of cheese. "Thank you, little explorer," she whispered. Max felt a warm glow in his heart. He learned that by helping someone else, he could find happiness for himself. Episode 6. The midnight storm. That night, the sky turned a dark, angry purple. The air felt heavy and still. Max was resting in his cardboard castle, but he felt nervous. He knew a big storm was coming. The wind began to howl, and the first drops of rain hit the cardboard. Drip, drop, splash. Max knew that his cardboard home would not stay dry for long. Cardboard is good for sun, but it is weak against a flood. Max grabbed his red hat in his mouth and ran. He needed a place with a real roof. He remembered a small garage he had seen near the bakery. As the rain turned into a heavy downpour, Max raced down the street. The water in the gutters was rising, and his little legs were getting tired. Finally, he saw the garage. The big door was closed, but there was a small hole at the bottom of the wall. Max wiggled his fluffy body through the hole. Inside, it was dark and smelled like old tires, but it was dry. Just as he settled down, he heard a tiny meow. In the corner, a small ginger kitten was shivering. She was very wet and very scared. Max didn't think twice. He walked over to the kitten and let her huddle against his warm white fur. He even placed his red hat over both of them like a tiny blanket. The thunder crashed outside, but inside the garage, Max and the kitten were safe. Max realized that he was growing up. He wasn't just a dog who needed a home. He was now a dog who could provide a home for someone else. He felt like a protector. As the kitten stopped shivering and fell asleep, Max felt proud of his strength. He was learning that a real home is not just a place, but the way we take care of each other. Episode 7, The Kitten's Path morning came with a soft, golden light. The storm had washed the streets clean, and the air smelled like wet earth. Max woke up and saw the ginger kitten stretching her tiny paws. She had a small collar around her neck with a tiny silver bell that went tink, tink, tink. Max remembered seeing a colorful paper on the bakery wall a few days ago. It had a picture of a ginger kitten that looked exactly like his new friend. Max knew what he had to do. He put on his red hat and nudged the kitten toward the door. Together, they walked through the puddles back toward the bakery. Max saw the poster again. It said "Lost Kitten" in big letters. Below the words was a phone number and a picture of a smiling little girl. Max sat under the poster and gave a loud, confident bark. He wanted someone to notice. The baker came outside and gasped. "Oh my, you found Daisy?" He cried. He quickly called the number on the paper. 10 minutes later, a car pulled up and a little girl jumped out. She hugged the kitten and cried happy tears. She looked at Max, sitting tall in his red hat, and reached into her pocket. She pulled out a beautiful blue silk ribbon and tied it carefully around Max's hat. "Thank you for saving her," she whispered. Max watched them drive away, feeling a tiny bit sad to say goodbye, but mostly he felt proud. He learned that being independent meant having the power to change someone else's life for the better. Episode 8. The library window of the city was very noisy that afternoon. There were many cars honking and many people walking fast. Max's ears felt tired from all the sounds. He wanted a place that was quiet and peaceful. He walked until he reached a very large building with tall stone steps and statues of lions at the entrance. This was the public library. Max noticed a small window near the ground that was slightly open to let in the fresh air. He hopped through the window and landed on a soft, red carpet. It was so quiet inside that Max could hear his own heartbeat. There were rows and rows of tall wooden shelves filled with thousands of books. Max walked slowly, his white paws making no sound. He found a cozy corner behind a large chair and curled up. He watched as a librarian read a story to a group of children. The children were listening with wide eyes, traveling to far-off lands in their minds. Max realized that he didn't need a television or a radio to see the world. He could find magic just by being in a place of learning. He spent the whole afternoon resting and listening to the soft turning of pages. He learned that even a dog on an adventure needs a quiet moment to rest his mind. When he finally hopped back out of the window as the sun was setting, he felt calm and refreshed. He realized that a clever dog should always look for places where knowledge and peace live together. Episode 9. The first snowfall one morning. Max woke up and found that the world had changed color. Everything was white. It was not just the color of his fur. The sidewalks, the trees, and the tops of the cars were all covered in a soft, cold powder. It was the first snow of the winter. In his old life, Max had always watched the snow from a warm window while lying on a soft rug. Now, he was right in the middle of it. Max stepped out of his shelter and his paws sank deep into the cold snow. He shivered, but he quickly put on his bright red hat. The red wool looked beautiful against the sparkling white ground. He realized that while the snow was pretty, it was also very dangerous for a little dog. It was hard to see where the ice was, and his tummy was touching the cool ground. I must find a way to stay warm and dry, Max thought. He walked toward the city park, where he saw a group of children building a giant snowman. They were laughing and running, but they looked worried. "We don't have a scarf for him," a little girl cried. Max looked around and saw a long piece of bright blue knitting wool caught on a low tree branch. He jumped up, grabbed the wool in his teeth, and trotted over to the children. The children cheered as Max dropped the wool at their feet. To thank him, one of the boys took an old, thick blanket from their sled and wrapped it around Max like a cape. "You're a hero, little snow dog," the boy said. Max felt a wonderful warmth spread through his body. He spent the afternoon playing in the snow, knowing that he was safe. He learned that even in the coldest weather, kindness can keep you warm. He wasn't just a dog in the snow. He was a dog with a purpose. Episode 10, The Secret of the Bridge. The snow had melted, leaving the city streets wet and shiny. Max decided to explore a new neighborhood across the big stone bridge. The bridge was very old, with tall lamps and many benches. As Max walked, he noticed an elderly man sitting on a bench, looking very upset. The man was searching the ground and his hands were shaking. His name was Mr. Albert. Max approached him slowly and sat down. He tilted his head, making his red hat lean to one side. Mr. Albert looked at Max and sighed. "Oh, hello, little one. I have a big problem. I dropped my wedding ring and it rolled into that small crack in the stone. My fingers are too big to reach it." Max looked at the deep, narrow crack in the bridge. It was much too small for a human hand, but Max had a very small, thin nose. Max lay down on his belly. He pushed his nose into the cold stone crack. He could smell the metal of the ring. He used his tongue and his teeth very carefully to grip the gold band. It was slippery, but Max didn't give up. Finally, with a small clink, he pulled the ring out and dropped it into Mr. Albert's hand. The old man gasped and hugged Max tightly. "You have no idea how much this means to me," he whispered. Mr. Albert took a small bag of dried chicken from his pocket and shared it with Max. They sat together on the bridge for a long time, watching the river flow below. Max realized that his small size was actually a great strength. He was learning that being independent didn't mean he had to be alone. It meant he had the skills to help others in need. As he walked home that evening, the blue ribbon on his hat fluttered in the breeze, and Max felt like he truly belonged in this city. Episode 11, The Flower Lady's Luck. Max walked to the big open square where the Saturday market was held. The air was filled with the scent of fresh strawberries and roasted coffee. Max's red hat was very famous now. The fruit sellers would wave at him as he passed, and some children would even point and whisper, "Look, it's the hat dog." He stopped at a flower stall owned by an old woman named Mrs. Bloom. She had the most beautiful purple lavender and yellow daisies. Suddenly, a very strong wind rushed through the market. It was so powerful that it knocked over a basket of Mrs. Bloom's small paper signs. These signs were very important because they told the prices of all her flowers. Without them, she couldn't sell anything. The papers began to tumble and roll across the crowded square. Mrs. Bloom cried out in worry, but she could not leave her stall because it was so busy. Max didn't hesitate for a single second. He dashed into the crowd, his white fur a blur of movement. Max was incredibly fast. He used his paws to pin down a sign near a fountain. Then he jumped over a vegetable crate to catch two more that were flying toward a puddle. He gathered all the papers in his mouth, being very careful not to tear them. When he returned to the stall, he dropped the stack at Mrs. Bloom's feet. She was so happy that she did a little dance of joy. "You are a wonder, Max," she said. She took a small, fragrant sprig of lavender and tucked it into the side of his red hat. She also gave him a large, juicy piece of cooked chicken from her lunch. Max realized that being independent also meant being part of a community. By helping others, he made the city a friendlier place for everyone. He walked away with the sweet smell of flowers following him, feeling like a very important citizen. Episode 12. The light in the dark, the sun was setting, casting long, orange shadows across the pavement. Max was walking near the edge of a construction site when he heard a tiny, high-pitched cry. It sounded like someone was very scared. Max followed the sound behind a tall pile of bricks. There, huddled together in the shadows, were 3 tiny puppies. They were much smaller than Max and didn't have any fluffy fur to keep them warm. The puppies looked at Max's red hat with wide, watery eyes. They were lost, cold, and very hungry. Max remembered exactly how he felt on his first day at the bus stop. He knew he couldn't leave them there in the dark. But he was only one dog. He couldn't carry 3 puppies by himself. He had to be a leader. He gave a soft, encouraging bark and nudged the oldest puppy with his nose. He wanted them to follow him to a safer place. Slowly, the tiny parade began. Max walked a few steps, then stopped and waited for the puppies to catch up. He led them away from the noisy construction site toward the local fire station. He knew the firefighters were kind people because he had seen them feed the birds before. When they reached the big red doors, Max barked as loudly as he could. A tall firefighter named Sam opened the door and looked down in surprise. "Well, look at this. Captain Max has brought us some guests." Sam laughed. He brought the puppies inside to a warm room with plenty of milk and soft blankets. He gave Max a respectful pat on the head and a delicious dog treat. Max stayed for a moment to make sure the puppies were happy and safe. Then he stepped back out into the night. He learned that his own journey had given him the strength to be a protector for those who were weaker. He looked up at the stars and felt a deep sense of peace. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was a hero. Episode 13. The Mystery of the Echo. One afternoon, Max found a long stone tunnel that went under a busy highway. It was dark inside and the air felt cool. Max liked the tunnel because it was a shortcut to the big park, but today something felt different. As he walked, he heard a sound. Click-clack, click-clack. He stopped. The sound stopped. He took another step. Click-clack. Max's heart beat a little faster. Was someone following him? He gave a small bark. Suddenly, a loud, deep bark came from the darkness in front of him. Max jumped back, and his red hat almost fell off. He felt very scared. He thought there was a giant, angry dog waiting for him in the shadows. He wanted to run away, but then he remembered his own bravery. He was Max, the explorer. He took a deep breath and walked forward slowly. He barked again, but this time, he listened carefully. The other dog barked at the exact same time. Max realized the truth. It's an echo, he thought. There was no monster. It was just the sound of his own voice bouncing off the stone walls. Max started to wag his tail. He began to bark a happy song, listening to the tunnel sing back to him. Just then, he saw a small puppy named Pip hiding behind a trash can near the exit. Pip was trembling. "Don't go in there," Pip whispered. "There is a ghost dog." Max smiled and nudged Pip with his fluffy shoulder. He showed Pip that the sounds were just echoes. Together, they walked through the tunnel, barking and laughing. Max learned that fear often comes from things we don't understand. Once you find the truth, the world isn't so scary anymore. Episode 14. The Golden Whistle. Max was walking past a school playground when he saw something sparkling in the grass. He trotted over and found a small, shiny silver whistle. It was attached to a bright yellow ribbon. Max knew this whistle was important. He had seen the school's crossing guard, Mr. Henderson, use it to help the children cross the street safely every morning. Without the whistle, the cars wouldn't know when to stop. Max picked up the whistle by the ribbon and looked around. Mr. Henderson was standing at the corner, looking very worried. He was checking his pockets and searching the ground. Max knew he had to return it, but he also knew he shouldn't run into the busy street. He had to be smart and safe. Max waited until the traffic light turned red and the cars stopped. Then he trotted quickly to the sidewalk where Mr. Henderson stood. He sat down politely and held the whistle up. Mr. Henderson looked down and his eyes went wide. "My whistle. Max, you found it." He took the whistle and gave it a loud, clear blow. "Sweet." The children smiled and started to cross the street. Mr. Henderson reached into his bag and gave Max a special blue ball to play with. "You are a very honest dog, Max," he said. Max felt very proud as he walked away. He learned that being independent means taking responsibility for the things you find. He didn't keep the shiny whistle for himself. He gave it back because it was the right thing to do. He realized that a good reputation is better than any toy. With his red hat on his head and his new blue ball in his mouth, Max felt like the most respected dog in the neighborhood. Episode 15, The Secret of the Garden. One afternoon, Max was exploring a quiet, narrow street he had never seen before. He found an old, rusty iron gate that was slightly open. Max was a curious dog, so he pushed the gate with his nose and stepped inside. He found himself in a small garden, but it was very messy. There were tall weeds everywhere, the grass was brown, and the flowers looked very thirsty. In the middle of the garden sat an old woman named Mrs. Green. She was sitting in a wooden chair, holding a small packet of seeds and looking very sad. "Oh, hello there, little cloud," Mrs. Green said in a soft, shaky voice. "I want to plant these beautiful sunflowers, but my back hurts today. I am too old to bend down and dig the holes in this hard dirt." Max looked at the seeds and then at the dry earth. He understood that she needed help. He walked to a sunny spot near the fence and began to use his strong front paws to dig. He worked carefully, making a neat row of small holes in the soil. Then he looked at Mrs. Green and gave a happy wag of his fluffy tail. Mrs. Green's eyes lit up with joy. "Are you helping me? You truly are a clever dog." She stood up slowly and dropped a shiny black seed into every hole Max had made. Max moved to the next row and dug more holes. They worked together for a long time. Max dug the holes and Mrs. Green planted the seeds. When they were finished, Max used his cold nose to push the soft dirt back over the seeds to keep them warm. Mrs. Green brought out a bowl of cool water and a piece of sweet apple for Max. "We will have a forest of gold soon," she whispered. Max felt a new kind of happiness in his heart. He learned that growth takes time and a lot of hard work. He didn't just find a garden. He helped create a future full of flowers. He realized that being independent meant using his strength to help those who were tired. As he left the garden, he knew he would return to see the sunflowers grow tall toward the sun. Episode 16, The Dancing Dog. The city square was filled with the beautiful high notes of a violin. A young man named Leo was playing music, but he looked very discouraged. His violin case was open on the cold pavement, but there were no coins inside. Many people were walking past him, but they were all looking at their phones or their watches. Nobody stopped to listen to his song. Max sat nearby and watched. He loved the music. It reminded him of the sound of the wind moving through the trees in the park. Max wanted to help his new friend. He stood up, adjusted his red hat so it was straight, and walked into the center of the square. As the music became faster and more cheerful, Max began to dance. He spun around in circles, making his white fur look like a swirling cloud. He hopped on his back legs and shook his ears, so the little blue ribbon on his hat fluttered. He looked so funny and cute that a little girl started to laugh and clap her hands. "Look, Mommy, the dog in the red hat is dancing to the music," she shouted out soon. A large circle of people gathered around. They weren't just looking at Max. They were finally hearing the wonderful music Leo was playing. People began to smile and tap their feet. They started to drop coins and even a few dollar bills into the violin case. The clinking sound of the money made Leo play with even more energy and passion. He and Max were working together like a professional team. The music and the dancing made the gray city square feel like a bright, happy party. When the song finally ended, Leo knelt down and gave Max a big, warm hug. "You saved my day, little explorer," Leo said with a giant smile. He shared his lunch with Max and gave him a gentle pat on the head. Max learned that he had a very special gift. He could bring people together and make them happy. He realized that even though he didn't have a human family yet, he was never truly alone because he could share joy with everyone he met. He walked away with his tail held high, feeling like a very important part of the city. Episode 17, The Paper Boat. The weather was warm and breezy, so Max decided to walk down to the city canal. The water was blue and calm, reflecting the fluffy white clouds that looked just like Max's fur. On the bank of the canal, a little boy named Toby was crying. He was holding a piece of string, but at the end of the string, there was nothing. His favorite paper boat had drifted away and was now stuck in a cluster of thick green reeds in the middle of the water. Max sat next to Toby and looked at the boat. He knew Toby couldn't swim out there because the water was too deep for a small boy. Max looked at his red hat and then at the ground. He remembered the lesson he learned with the stick in the hedge. He looked around and found a long, sturdy piece of driftwood. He picked it up in his mouth and walked to the very edge of the stone path. Max didn't jump into the water because he knew his heavy fur would get soaked. Instead, he leaned out as far as he could and used the driftwood to gently nudge the paper boat. He pushed and pulled, moving the boat inch by inch away from the reeds. Finally, the wind caught the paper sail and the boat floated back to the shore. Toby let out a cheer and grabbed his toy. "You're the best dog in the world, Max," he cried, hugging Max's soft neck. Max felt a wave of pride. He learned that being independent meant being a problem solver. He didn't need to be big or strong to help. He just needed to be patient and use his surroundings. Toby shared a piece of his peanut butter sandwich with Max, and they spent the rest of the afternoon watching the water together. Max realized that every day was a chance to learn something new about the world and about himself. Episode 18, The Lost Key. Sun was starting to go down when Max reached a large apartment building with a beautiful garden. He saw a young woman named Sarah sitting on the front steps. She looked very stressed and was emptying her entire purse onto the ground. Oh no, she whispered. "I've lost my house key. If I can't find it, I'll have to wait outside all night." Max could see that she was close to tears. Max remembered that dogs have a superpower that humans do not have, a very powerful nose. He walked over to Sarah and sniffed the air near her purse. He caught the scent of cold metal and a faint smell of lavender perfume. Max put his nose to the ground and started to walk back the way Sarah had come. He followed the scent across the sidewalk, past a park bench, and toward a large pile of crunchy autumn leaves. He began to dig through the leaves with his paws, his red hat bobbing up and down. Suddenly, his nose touched something cold and hard. He moved a big yellow leaf and found a silver key on a purple keychain. Max picked it up carefully and trotted back to the apartment building. He sat in front of Sarah and dropped the key. Right on top of her pile of things. Sarah gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. "Max, you found it! You're a miracle dog." She picked up the key and gave Max a big, happy kiss on his forehead. She went inside and came back out with a warm bowl of chicken soup and a soft old blanket for him to keep. Max realized that his skills were growing every day. He wasn't just a dog with a hat. He was a dog who could find what was lost. He felt confident and strong, knowing that he could take care of himself and the people around him. Episode 19, The City's Hero. It was a special evening in the city. The big town square was decorated with hundreds of twinkling lights for the winter festival. Max walked through the crowd, his red hat sitting proudly on his head. As he walked, something amazing happened. People started to stop and point. "Look, it's Max," a little boy cried. "It's the brave dog who found the wedding ring." An old man said Max was surprised. He didn't know that everyone had been talking about him. He saw the baker from the Golden Crust, who waved a fresh croissant at him. He saw Maya, the artist, who was painting a new picture of a dog in a red hat. He even saw the firefighter Sam, who gave him a friendly salute. Max realized that he was no longer an abandoned dog. He was the most famous and well-loved citizen in the whole city. As the music began to play, Max sat by the large fountain. He thought about his journey. He remembered the cold rain of the bus stop and how scared he had been. He thought about the hunger he felt before he found his cardboard castle. He had learned how to find food, how to stay warm, and how to help others. He wasn't just a dog who had survived. He was a dog who had thrived. He felt a deep sense of peace. He had become independent, but in doing so, he had woven himself into the hearts of everyone he met. He realized that a home isn't always 4 walls and a roof. Sometimes a home is an entire city that loves you. Episode 20, The Forever Home. On the last day of the festival, a soft snow began to fall. Max was resting near the library when he saw a familiar car pull up. Out stepped the little girl who owned the ginger kitten, Daisy. Her name was Lily. She walked straight toward Max with a big smile on her face. Behind her were her parents, carrying a soft blue dog bed and a bowl of warm food. "Max," Lily said, kneeling in the snow, "we have thought about you every day since you saved. Daisy, we have a big house with a warm fireplace and a backyard full of trees. We want you to be part of our family. Will you come home with us?" Max looked at Lily, then he looked at the red hat he had found on that rainy day. The hat had been his first friend. It had given him the courage to be independent. But now, he realized that his long journey of being alone was finally over. Max stepped forward and licked Lily's hand. He hopped in the back of the car and curled up on the soft blue bed. As the car drove away from the city center, Max looked out the window. He saw the bakery, the library, and the bridge where he had found the ring. He was leaving his life as a stray, but he wasn't leaving his strength behind. He knew that if he ever faced a problem, he was smart enough to solve it. When they arrived at the new house, Lily's mother tried to take off his red hat to wash it, but Max gently put his paw on her hand. He wanted to keep it. The hat was a reminder of the dog he had become, a dog who was brave, kind, and independent. Max fell asleep that night in front of a warm fire, with Daisy the kitten curled up against his white fur. He was Max, the dog with the red hat, and he was finally truly home.